I gotta say, the Golden State Warriors have made some interesting moves as of late and have really turned this roster into an interesting one. It's old, but it might be good. I could see this team being legitimately competitive this year and being a really interesting team as this season progresses. Obviously, with a player like Steph Curry, you always have a chance, and you want to, even with Steph entering the later portion of his career, give him an opportunity to succeed as much as possible. And their transition era picks have not gone as well as hoped, with guys like James Wiseman, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. A lot of these draft picks not having worked out quite as anticipated, expected, desired, whatever the case may be. And it's put them in a situation now where, obviously, with the addition of Jimmy Butler at the trade deadline last season, still having Steph and Draymond, this is an aging roster with a couple of semi-interesting young pieces, but in a weird spot. And I think they've made some really good additions as of late to try to give this team the best chance they can to succeed. I mean, if we look at what their roster now officially looks like after the past week, going into the 25-26 season, it will likely look like this, with these 14 guys in regular rotation, or I guess rotation spots. But these will probably be the 14 guys on a night-to-night basis, and then your two-way guys as well. But Steph, Podziemski, Jimmy, Draymond, and Al Horford, with D'Anthony Melton, Buddy Hield, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, Quentin Post coming off the bench, and then you got GP2, as well as Trace Jackson Davis, Guy Santos, and Will Richard as well towards the end of the bench. I will say, I like this team a little more than I did last season, I think. Well, number one, D'Anthony Melton wasn't healthy last season after the first couple weeks. D'Anthony Melton was actually really, really good for the Warriors last year, and I think definitely is a guy who can really help this team out quite a lot. Again, I don't know if they have, I mean, Steph and Jimmy is definitely a good duo, but I don't know if they have the real star power to compete with the very best in the West at this point. I mean, it's just, do we think Steph and Jimmy are that level of players anymore? Steph is still probably a top 10 player, but is Jimmy still capable of playing on a top 20 to 30 player level on a consistent night-to-night basis? We'll find out. I like the depth. I think Melton was a huge addition, being able to bring him back. They will add Seth Curry to this team later on this season as well, which of course gives you even more shooting ability. But they can't currently sign Seth because their contract, if we look at Bobby Marks, their roster right now is these 14 guys plus their two ways, obviously, but those same guys that I already showed in that other tweet. And that puts them right now at $205.8 million. The second apron is $207.8 million. So what that basically leaves them with is not having enough money to sign Seth Curry as of right now, because the veteran minimum is $2.3 million. They only have $2 million of cap space. So what's going to happen is, not exactly sure when, but the way that this has been announced is that Seth Curry has signed an Exhibit 10 contract with the Warriors, which means that he is eligible to play with them during training camp and in the preseason, stuff like that, and then will be waived with no guaranteed money, anything like that on that contract. He will get paid during training camp, and then he will get waived. And then once the prorated veteran minimum for the rest of the season is less than $2 million, they will sign Seth Curry so as to retain the ability to stay under that second apron. Jonathan Kuminga, if I'm not mistaken, is available to be traded January 15th. They just re-signed him to a 2-year, $48 million contract, but the second year is a team option that is expected to be declined if he makes it through this season with the Warriors. I think really in large part the conversation is basically this gives Kuminga a lot of flexibility this summer regardless. He will either be an unrestricted free agent, well, he'll almost certainly be an unrestricted free agent, or he will be on a different team if he does get traded post January 15th before the trade deadline, which could absolutely happen. I wouldn't be surprised if he winds up being a real contributor or real trade chip again, if especially if things don't wind up going well with him. Because last year he shot 30% from three. I don't know if you could have a guy like Jonathan Kuminga on the court that much with Jimmy Butlers and Draymond Greens and guys like that who can't shoot the ball, if he's not going to shoot a little bit better than that from the three-point line. You got to have him, he's got to be higher than 30% from three. Yes, can be a very impactful guy off the dribble. He's got an athleticism and ability to attack the paint and get to the rim that this Warriors team kind of lacks otherwise. But Jimmy, in a lot of ways, came in and filled the role that I think Kuminga was potentially able to at times fill for this Warriors team. Jimmy can get to the free throw line. Jimmy operates in the painted area and gets into the paint and around the rim very, very effectively. Like, I think Kuminga almost role-wise doesn't fit with this Warriors team anymore, and so they signed him to an extension, but I don't know if he's going to stay on this team long term. He feels like a guy who's going to get traded to me, to be totally honest. That's where I am with Jonathan Kuminga at this point, is that we'll see what happens, but I think he probably gets traded later on this year. When you look at odds, they're currently the 7th best odds in the Western Conference, which isn't great, obviously, and I think understandably so. I think there's a lot more confidence, obviously, in the Thunder, but then in the Nuggets, who got better this offseason, the Rockets, who, even with Fred VanVleet's injury, probably got better this offseason, and also are in a weird contract spot where they don't really have a ton of point guards, especially with Fred VanVleet's injury, and can't really add guys right now, but later on in the season, maybe they will. We'll see. The Lakers look improved, honestly, overall as well, especially if DeAndre Ayton is going to be good. He looks like he's in really good shape, so we'll see. Timberwolves are competitive still. Clippers are older, but still pretty good, depending on what happens with that whole situation, obviously, with Kawhi Leonard and a lot of things going on behind the scenes there. And they're, again, also a very old team with Chris Paul and Bradley Beal and all these different guys who are like, it's kind of a weird fit with that roster. And I know I'll talk about that team soon, because that's just a weird team, honestly. But all things considered, I think the Warriors, do I think they're serious title contenders? I'd be really surprised. I don't know if they have that much talent on their roster. I don't know if they have that much depth. But I think they're going to be pretty good. I think they'll overall probably be better than last year. I think adding even an old Al Horford does, if nothing else, improve your floor spacing, and your cohesiveness of your lineup on a night-to-night basis gives you more size, more flexibility. I think overall, I mean, the only important piece they really lost this offseason was Kevon Looney. I do think Horford, even old, probably an upgrade over that. I don't hate it. You know what I mean? Is this team going to be great? Probably not. Do they have the pieces to be very competitive on a consistent basis? 100%. I think they'll be a little better defensively probably than they were last season, which should help. Hopefully Podziemski isn't completely god-awful for the first half of the year like he was last year. I mean, it just wasn't a very good year for him. Hopefully DeAnthony Melton doesn't tear his ACL this year. That'd be nice. Buddy Hield was really good at times for the Warriors last year. We'll see if he can do that again this year. GP2 still can't shoot. Moses Moody has not developed like people were hoping he would. I'm not sure you're getting a ton of contributions from either of those guys off the bench. Kuminga, we'll see what happens. Quentin Post and Trace Jackson Davis, only one of those two guys likely will have a consistent role this year with Al Horford. So it's going to be interesting to see who winds up being the guy who has that role. And I mean, they have a decent amount of draft assets going towards the future. So we'll see what, not a ton, but I mean, they have 4 tradable firsts at least. So they do have some flexibility there. They have 7 incoming first round picks. Really? I don't know how that works. All right. Anyways, look, the Warriors roster is certainly positioned to be competitive. The idea for this team is certainly to try to win another title. I think that's obviously the goal. I just don't know if that's really the possibility. That being said, Steph Curry has given so much to the Golden State Warriors. And I do think it is the least that it can do to, in his later years, try your best to continue to give him an opportunity to be as successful and as competitive as possible for as long as possible. And they've done a good job of extending that window a long time now. We're in 2025. This team is still going to be very solid. And I mean, who knows? Maybe Kuminga plays really well and they wind up with a really valuable trade piece on their hands come mid-season. Obviously, there would have to be different stuff, probably contract extensions or reworks or stuff like that involved. But who knows? We'll see what happens. I'm interested to see what happens with this year for sure, with this team this year for sure, because they are going to be one of the oldest teams, certainly in basketball, maybe the oldest team in basketball. I wouldn't be surprised with Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, and Al. I mean, those are some old dudes, man, but those are also some veterans with a lot of championship experience. I could see this team, if some young guys step up and some things go well, being really competitive. We'll see what happens. I hope y'all did enjoy the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with more 2K content, NBA content very, very soon. I appreciate y'all. Peace.